On August 24, 1992, the Oslo Peace Accord continued in Washington, D.C. On August 24th, the very same day, Hurricane Andrew came smashing and crashing into Florida. Andrew caused over $30 billion in damage and destroyed over 180,000 homes. At that time, Hurricane Andrew was the worst natural disaster ever to hit America. The Bible tells us in Psalm 135 verse 7, He causes the vapors to rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightnings for the rain. He brings wind out of his storehouses. The Hebrew word for storehouses is otzor, which means armory. Anyone in the military can confirm that an armory is where the weapons are stored. Perhaps God is giving us a timely warning, even though these words were penned 3,000 years ago. After Desert Storm, President Bush Sr. had a whopping 91% approval rating. This was the highest presidential approval rating in US history. He got involved in the Oslo Peace Accords, and within 18 months he was voted out of office and replaced by William Jefferson Clinton. During President Clinton's term in office, there were 19 major disasters in America that all happened on the exact same day or within 24 hours of applying pressure on Israel to give up more land. On January 16, 1994, President Bill Clinton met with Syria's President Hafez al-Assad in Geneva. They talked about a peace agreement with Israel that included Israel giving up the Golan Heights. President Clinton, in his infinite wisdom, was prepared to give away the Golan Heights, which is a perfect defensive buffer zone that separates Israel and Syria. In military terms, whoever controls the mountains controls the plains, and this was about to be a sellout of Israel's defense capability. On January 17, 1994, less than 24 hours later, a 6.9 earthquake rocked Northridge, California. This mysterious quake, centered in Northridge, was the second most destructive natural disaster to hit the United States behind Hurricane Andrew. This quake caused $15.3 billion of damage and was at ground zero of America's pornography industry. On January 21st, 1998, President Clinton was in the White House with Yasser Arafat, the chairman of the P.L.O, and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Intense pressure was being applied to the Israeli Prime Minister to give up more land, give up more land. The very same day, a storm erupted for Bill Clinton. The Monica Lewinsky scandal was the top news story of the day, and his presidency was never quite the same from that day on. From January 3rd to April 11 of 1998, intense pressure was being applied to Israel to give up land for peace. On the same 4 days when the most intense pressure was applied, NASDAQ losses on the US stock market wiped trillions of dollars off America's wealth. During the presidency of George W. Bush, there were at least 34 major disasters as of December 2007, and every single one occurred or was triggered within 24 hours of putting pressure on Israel to divide the land. From August 25th to September the 10th of 2001, 4 big decision makers were working on the most comprehensive plan ever put together on the Middle East. President Bush, with Saudi Arabia's Prince Bandar bin Sultan, Secretary of State Colin Powell, and US Ambassador to Israel Daniel Kurtzer worked for 17 days on this plan, which was to be presented to the UN General Assembly on September 24th, 2001. This plan involved dividing Israel and the creation of a Palestinian state and was completed on September 10, 2001. Less than 24 hours later, the greatest terrorism event ever in American history exploded on America's doorstep, 9/11. Nearly 3,000 people died, and the initial cost was $40 billion. The resultant war on terror has now cost America almost $1 trillion. On 9/11, jihad had come to America. On August 15, 2005, thousands of Israeli soldiers began delivering eviction notices to settlers who had lived on the Gaza Strip for 35 years. 55,000 Israeli soldiers and 8,000 police enforced the evictions. The choice was to move voluntarily or by force. On August 23rd, forced evacuations were complete as part of the US-sponsored Roadmap to Peace plan. On August 23rd, 2005, the very same day the Israeli evacuation was completed, Tropical Storm Katrina formed off the coast of America. Hurricane Katrina built up strength and 6 days later exploded into New Orleans. This was the most destructive hurricane ever experienced in America. 1,836 people died and another 705 were listed as missing. The initial estimated damage bill was $81 billion. There are some staggering parallels between the forced evacuations in Israel and the events surrounding Katrina. Israeli settlements at Gaza and Samaria were under military occupation during evacuation, and so was New Orleans. Israel's Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, ordered mandatory evacuations. New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin ordered mandatory evacuations. The men and women of the Israeli Defense Forces have a worldwide reputation for bravery in battle, yet many of these soldiers wept as they drove their fellow Israelis from their homes, just as thousands would weep in America as they lost all to Hurricane Katrina. Thousands were driven from their homes in Israel, and hundreds of thousands lost their homes in America. If America continues to blatantly defy the Word of God with their dealings towards God's heritage Israel, then buckle up, because you ain't seen nothing yet. The year 2007 produced 9 major FEMA disasters and 2 major crises which coincided with US involvement in the Israel peace process. Keith Ellison, also known as Hakeem Muhammad, is America's first elected Muslim congressman who swore his oath of office on the Quran. On August 1, 2007, he stated he was going back to Israel to work on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The very same day, August 1, 2007, the Minneapolis, Minnesota bridge collapsed in Ellison's congressional district. Amazingly, the bridge span connected the 2 campuses of the University of Minnesota, known as the West Bank and the East Bank. One of the major areas of contention in Israel is called the West Bank. What a coincidence! The very day Ellison was planning to solve the West Bank issues in Israel, a major disaster struck in the West Bank of Minneapolis in his congressional district. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice was in Israel from October the 14th to the 18th in 2007, where she was calling for a Palestinian state and discussed the dividing of Jerusalem in a land for peace deal. 24 hours after Condoleezza left Jerusalem, Southern California began experiencing record Santa Ana winds. Santa Ana winds are normally in the 20-mile-per-hour range. This time they became hurricane-force winds ranging from 75 to 108 miles per hour. The massive winds helped to produce massive fires that have been called the perfect fire. These fires were clearly visible from a satellite 200 miles above the Earth, and they led to the largest evacuation in Californian history, with 1 million people being evacuated. 1,500 homes were destroyed. 600,000 acres were burned, with losses of $1 billion plus in San Diego County alone. Most of the statistical data used to this point can readily be found in the book Eye to Eye, Facing the Consequences of Dividing Israel, which is one of the greatest books ever written on end times Bible prophecy. The author, William Koenig, is a White House correspondent and director of Koenig's International News. In 2008, the disasters in America escalated in number and severity, and once again there is an undeniable direct link between these events and America's involvement in putting pressure on Israel to divide the land. Here are just a few of the disasters that struck America in 2008. On January 8, 2008, President Bush left for Israel to promote dividing of the covenant land into a Palestinian state. While President Bush was in Israel, the United States was devastated by an unprecedented tornado outbreak, and the stock market was in complete chaos. The tornado outbreak had a total of 74 twisters over a 5-day period and was one of the most powerful January storms in history, creating tornadoes from Alabama to Wisconsin. On March 15, 2008, Secretary of State Rice criticized Israel for not moving fast enough in creating a Palestinian state. On March 15, the very same day, a severe storm hit Georgia, and a tornado actually went through the heart of Atlanta. The Midwest was being hit by storm after storm, with widespread flooding and tornado damage. As Secretary Rice was applying pressure on Israel, the USA's economy was in deep trouble. The dollar was rapidly declining, and the price of gold was surging. In mid-March, Bear Stearns, one of the largest investment banks, collapsed and needed to be bailed out by the Federal Reserve and other banks. The Federal Reserve, for the first time ever, intervened in this way. It was done to prevent the collapse of the entire stock market and financial system. On March 19, President Bush declared a major disaster area for large sections of Missouri. These storms built upon the January floods and set the stage for massive flooding in June.